Okay, guys, today I'm going to review The Rational Optimist. How Prosperity Evolves by Matt Ridley. So Matt Ridley, he's a pretty prolific author, especially with science. I think, well, maybe only science. I'm not familiar with any of his books outside of science, so he might only be a science writer. I'll put some information up on the screen about the books he's written. Genome is one of his big ones, The Red Queen. Also, after this book came out, he wrote The Evolution of Everything, and I'll be covering that book pretty soon because I've already reread that one again for a review. So that one will be coming soon. But this book, The Rational Optimist, this is his book about why everything is the way it is today. Really, why is today the best that it's ever been? What's driven that progress, and why we should be optimistic that pattern of evolving prosperity will continue. And in this book, Matt Ridley starts, way back like 200,000 years ago when humans first arrived, and he kind of follows history forward, and he interprets events in the context of his theory, his idea about everything evolving and prosperity, coming out of that. So Matt Ridley's argument or his premises, well, there's two of them. The first one is that prosperity comes from the evolution of ideas, and it's humans had this ability to share ideas and to communicate ideas, and this exchange of ideas led to new ideas being formed, and that process was why technology evolved. It's why cultural practices evolved. It's why good ideas spread through the world, and we iterated on them and we improved them, and they continually got better. And as he goes through history, he shows a lot of examples of where resource deficient trading towns or trading cities ended up becoming really popular and really wealthy because of this exchange of information, whereas there's other examples of really top-down, like dictator type societies where the emperor or whoever controls everything. And even if they have a lot of resources, those types of places, they never got that prosperous. It was trading communities. It was where information kind of came to a crossroads where people really got rich. And he uses this to kind of illustrate his argument that what's really driving prosperity is the exchange of ideas, and why humans are so special is because we are uniquely able to share and communicate these ideas. And that's a pretty convincing argument. I think he makes that point pretty well. I'm on board with that. His second argument is a little different. It's a little more broad, and it's kind of a two-parter. He kind of states that the reason why everything's good today is because of this principle, but also the more important kind of conjecture is that this principle will continue on in the future. And I guess that alone isn't very, that's not controversial at all. Like, I think everything's going to get better. I'm pretty on board with that idea. I think Steven Pinker, he's another writer, author who's really kind of on that same page and pushing that narrative that things are the best they've ever been and they will continue to get better. However, in this book, Matt Ridley kind of takes that idea and he pushes it to some examples that might be a little beyond what he's argued for or what he's convinced the reader of. And really, it's at the end of the book, he gets to the present time because the book starts 200,000 years ago and makes it up to the present. And that's 85, 90% of the book. And then the last little bit is kind of the modern era. And really, when dealing with the modern era, he makes a few points. One is that the big things that everyone's pessimistic about now is Africa and climate change. And he thinks that Africa will get rich. And very controversially, he thinks that climate change is like a big hoax. He doesn't think it's fake, but he thinks that, human progress, we'll come up with new technologies to solve the problems that carbon creates and that pollution creates. And he's confident that technology will solve a lot of problems. But he also says that it would be extremely unethical to try to get less developed countries to stop using fossil fuels because it's too good of a way to improve the lives of very poor people, and that it's unethical to do that. So really, we should just let everyone use fossil fuels, and we should just focus on coming up with new technologies. And that point alone isn't extremely controversial. There's a lot of people who would argue against it, especially the argument about letting poor people use fossil fuels or helping them use fossil fuels because it's morally beneficial. I think that is a stretch for a lot of people. However, when he's talking about climate change, he really makes a point that we don't need to do anything, that it will naturally happen. One of the negative things about this book, one of the things I didn't like about this book is that in his writing, he kind of throws in some personal opinions as he's making this argument about the evolution of ideas. And one thing he kind of pushes but never supports, in my opinion at least, is that there's no room for any kind of top-down management, or he's so against top-down systems that he really doesn't see any use of them or point for using them. And to bring this back to climate change, when he's talking about climate change, he doesn't think we need top-down solutions. He thinks that just bottom-up solutions will solve all the issues of climate change. And I think that's kind of I don't agree with him. I don't think most people would agree with him on that. I think there's a lot of room for top-down type solutions. There's a lot of room for bottom-up solutions as well, but I don't see any reason why we shouldn't be looking at top-down solutions at least as part of the solution for climate change. But Matt Ridley, he has this really capitalist view, this libertarian view that we don't have to do anything and everything will be great as far as climate change goes. And that's kind of a stretch for the book. And I think that's kind of where the book breaks down, is because when he gets into these opinionated areas, you really start to see kind of how lazy he was at really tying up loose ends with some of his arguments. He kind of strawmans the opposing arguments throughout the book. It's not a huge deal because he doesn't spend that much time talking about opposing arguments, which is kind of its own negative, but the scope of the book is telling this historical narrative, so he kind of has to leave a lot of stuff out. But when he does mention opposing arguments, he does not show them any kind of respect, and it really seems like he's kind of strawmanning their point of view. And that comes out the most at the end of the book when he gets into climate change and the present stuff, because that's really where he's talking about things that we're dealing with today. And this book's a little bit old. I think it was written in the early 2000s or maybe the 90s. Let me check. 2010. Okay, so it's newer than I thought. But yeah, it's like the 2000s, so almost a decade ago now. So we've got a whole another decade of climate change studies and, horrible hurricanes and crazy weather. So this book really doesn't hold up on that aspect, but I do agree with his overall narrative, or the overall argument that prosperity evolves through the exchange of ideas, and that being open societies where everyone can exchange ideas freely are really the kind of the best environment for letting prosperity evolve. And I love that argument. I think he makes it pretty well, but I don't think this book is the best communicator of that idea, because he puts these other things in the book that really detract from the good part of his argument. And so I think I would recommend most people skip this book. This book is like half an argument about the evolution of ideas, then half of it is an argument that everything's the best it's ever been. And I think you could read his book he wrote after this, The Evolution of Everything. That book talks about how things evolve much more comprehensively. And Steven Pinker's book, Enlightenment Now, covers kind of why things are the best they've ever been. And I think Steven Pinker does a better job. So I don't know if there's really a good reason to read The Rational Optimist today. I think there's other books that do or that convey the points better and with less negatives. So it's a good book. I enjoyed reading it. I really enjoyed it the first time I read it, but kind of reflecting on it today when I reread it, I kind of don't have quite as good of an opinion as I used to have, but I think, I enjoyed it, but unfortunately, I don't really think the book has a really strong place on a bookshelf today with all the other options that people have available to them. So I hope you guys like this review. I've got another review coming very soon. It's going to be for Matt Ridley's other book, The Evolution of Everything. So stick around for that review, and I hope to see you guys in the next one.